Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox, and I'd like to welcome you to episode 81 of Compliance Into the Weeds. This is Compliance Into the Weeds' first emergency podcast, and today Matt Kelly and I take up the revelations of payments to Michael Cohen and his consulting company, Essential Consultants, by U.S. companies and foreign companies such as AT&T, Novartis, and Korea Aerospace for consulting fees after the Trump election. We explore this from the compliance practitioner angle and what the compliance practitioner needs to do around these types of third-party hires. It's a fascinating exploration, literally torn from today's headlines. I know you'll find it interesting. This is Tom Fox. Thank you for listening to this episode of Compliance Into the Weeds. Compliance Into the Weeds is a part of the Compliance Podcast Network. Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox, and Matt Kelly and I are here for a special emergency episode of Compliance Into the Weeds. It's the first time we've had one. I am giving a speech in Brazil this afternoon, but we had news yesterday and today that we thought warranted an emergency podcast. So, Matt, welcome, and why don't you just lay it out for us?
Sure. So the big news, I think, is that yesterday's bombshell from Stormy Daniels' attorney, Michael Avenatti, who published a report where he identified $4.4 million that Donald Trump's former attorney, Michael Cohen, currently under investigation by the U.S. Attorney's Office in New York, $4.4 million that Michael Cohen received via his shell company, Essential Consultants, which he had created in 2016 to pay off Stormy Daniels in hush money just before the election. And we've all seen that Essential Consultants was a conduit to get $130,000 supposedly from the president to Stormy Daniels that she would shut up about the affair that they had. Now Avenatti has news that millions more dollars went into that same shell company from some very large businesses, both foreign and domestic, that were apparently paying what are consulting fees or for insight and advice from Michael Cohen about the Trump administration. Needless to say, this does not look good because some of them, I'll give you some of the amounts, $200,000 that AT&T paid. That has been confirmed by AT&T. They admitted that. $400,000 from Novartis that they paid. And then shortly after the last payment, Novartis' new CEO had a private audience with the president while he was at Davos earlier this year. And then most troubling is $500,000 that Michael Cohen received from Viktor Vekselberg, who is a Russian oligarch. I believe he's a Ukrainian national who has somehow made his billions in Russia, who is under sanction under U.S. law and has been interviewed by Robert Mueller, the special counsel. And Vekselberg funneled at least $500,000 into Essential Consultants as well. All of this happened during the Trump presidency. Many of these payments were made clear up until January of this year, shortly before the hush money payoff to Stormy Daniels news became public. And then if you've done the math so far, I've only described about $1.2 million worth of money where it came from. Avenatti is alleging that $4.4 million has gone into Essential Consultants. Where's the other $3 million coming from? What was it used for? We don't know. I strongly suspect we will find out soon because Michael Avenatti is running rings around Michael Cohen and the Trump administration. But here we are, and it raises all sorts of questions about due diligence and internal controls and influence peddling and not nice stuff. If you are the board of AT&T or Novartis or anybody else who's probably just wondering, do we have Michael Cohen risk now? Is this a thing? You know, how did we get here? But here we are.
Well, Matt.
How'd I do, Tom?
You know, Matt, I would have to say that with your cachet in the compliance community, when you announce something is a thing, it's a thing. So it is now a thing, as pronounced by Radical Compliance. But Matt, I guess a couple of things, actually a lot of things, are intriguing about this. But from the compliance practitioner perspective, should compliance have visibility into something like this? Because if you are in the United States, given the McConnell decision by the U.S. Supreme Court, should compliance be concerned with consultants hired in the United States, whether or not they are there to engage in lobbying or other influence peddling, or do you think something that could blow up so precipitously like this really requires that sort of scrutiny and oversight from a corporate function at this point?
Well, I mean, it's a fair point to raise. And I know, Tom, you've raised this before about the McConnell decision that giving money to U.S. lawmakers now is not necessarily going to be first off, there's no direct implications of a quid pro quo have been raised yet. But even if they were, it's not necessarily clear that that would be illegal. I get that. But from a best practices consideration, do compliance officers want to know about this? I would say yes, because I am sure there are many boards filling out this morning wondering, do we have a problem with this? And if you don't know what's been going on, then you can't give a good answer to that. And I would also say that it is just important to think about best practice and what is right today, even if the law might allow you to do it, because the law or circumstance may change in the future. So let me give you some examples of where my mind is going, particularly around AT&T. So the obvious cynical interpretation is going to be that AT&T was paying money to Cohen that somehow was going to get to Donald Trump because his administration was overseeing, number one, AT&T's merger of Time Warner, which is being challenged by the Justice Department on antitrust grounds. Number two, Trump is also overseeing the Federal Communications Commission, which gave a very favorable ruling to AT&T and other large providers when it repealed net neutrality. Could we say that AT&T was paying this money so that it would get favorable rulings? Well, sure, you can say it. Is it true? We don't know. And we should be clear about that. However, if you are a state attorney general who is suing the FCC over neutrality, you might now want to try subpoenaing the records from the FCC and the Trump administration. Were any orders given to do this? You might want us to put a discovery request on AT&T. What were your reasons for this? Would you have any communications around how this payoff was made, Michael Cohen? Really? Was he somebody who deserved $200,000 for what services did he give? Imagine if the Democrats take the House again in November and come next year, they open a formal investigation into Michael Cohen and essential consultants. And now they're going to start subpoenaing your records. If you're AT&T's legal department, you certainly don't want that outcome. But all of those circumstances are plausible in the future, and they will be much more difficult if you, the compliance officer, were not involved in these conversations here. And like I said before, we've only tracked about 1/4 of the payments that Essential Consultants has so far. We don't know where the other millions came from. Maybe there are other companies involved. Maybe they were more naked about the transactional influence of it. But I'll give credit to Erica Salmon Byrne from Ethisphere, where she had pointed out yesterday. So we have a Delaware company, newly formed, and we're giving it hundreds of thousands of dollars. You know, what due diligence was performed there? What services was Michael Cohen rendering? What was the commensurate rate for consultants to offer insights into the Trump administration? What sort of payment approval process was there? Was it followed? Was there any sort of management override? Would AT&T normally give hundreds of thousands of dollars to some solo guy who hangs a shingle under a Delaware shell corporation within a couple of months? Or would there be reviews? Were there reviews here? If not, why not? All sorts of stuff that you're correct to say in the U.S. because of the McConnell ruling. Maybe it isn't illegal, but if this had happened anywhere else in the world, and we were talking about a foreign government and payments to that foreign president's former litigation advisor and fixer and hundreds of thousands of dollars going to him, like, we would be talking about FCPA risk up to your eyeballs. It's the same sort of misconduct, even if the law here seems to be a bit out of shape. But I mean, how would you not want to be involved or be aware of this if you're a compliance officer? That's my takeaway.
Well, what if AT&T had just said, we'd really, the president of AT&T had said, it's been one of my life dreams to sleep in the Lincoln bedroom. And I'm willing to pay $500,000 for that. And if, somebody named President Trump happens to wander by, maybe I could say hello.
Well,
How is that different?
First off, if the president of AT&T wanted to do that, I'm sure there are ways he could do it. However, I don't think he personally would cut a check from AT&T, the company, which is what Michael Cohen got. He got a check from the corporation. I see your point and where you're going, and I did make a quip on Twitter today that you would think if AT&T wanted to pay off the Trump administration to wield some influence, they would do it in a civilized manner and, some sort of dark money super PAC donation or to his inauguration committee or some other way like that, it's a respectable form of evading good taste and common sense. This just runs smack into the wall of common sense. I think if it were happening in a foreign country, it would stink. There are ways you could do it in the United States where it would stink less, and companies do that all the time with parties, Democrat and Republican. I am not naive about that. But what they are doing here, it does not pass the smell test. Within an hour of this news breaking last night, I had a friend of mine saying, so wait, does this mean my AT&T bill helps Michael Cohen pay off other porn stars? That's a bit of a stretch, but you can't say right now definitively that, no, it's not. Maybe it is. We don't know. And I strongly suspect that the U.S. Attorney's Office is asking questions like that. We don't know where this is going to end, but so far it's going nowhere good for anyone involved with Michael Cohen and the Central Consultants.
So I certainly agree that it's going nowhere good, nowhere very quickly. I was intrigued, though, by the comments you brought up by Erica Salmon Byrne about the process. And if AT&T had a process and if they had followed that process, do you think in this case that would give them some cover to say we had a legitimate business reason to do this? Or is it simply because of who Michael Cohen is at this point in history, nothing's going to give them cover?
Well, that's a very good question, and I don't know. But, I would love to see their rationale or their defense of why they decided to pay him that much money. If you dive into the FCPA guidance from the Justice Department from 2012, and I know people want to say that this is not, let's not diverge into an FCPA issue, but consider some of these questions. You would ask, did the company understand the role and the need of the third party? What were the payment terms? How do they compare to typical terms for a consultant? I'm struck by the specific dates of these transfers. They all ended right around the first week of January. Well, what happened on January 12th? The Wall Street Journal had a story that Michael Cohen had paid off Stormy Daniels. And so suddenly all of this money evaporated. Well, what is Michael Cohen's services now? Does he know less about the Trump administration today than he did a couple of months ago? No, of course not. Suddenly you realize that the sleazy guy you were dealing with, well, now everyone knows he's a sleaze, so we're going to stop the payments. It doesn't look good. If he is a wise and astute, thoughtful person about the inner workings of Donald Trump, that holds true today. And so why wouldn't you keep going? Well, you wouldn't keep going because you don't want to be smeared by him. That means you must have known there's potential for getting besmirched. So, none of this passes the smell test. Now, once we get into the legalities of the McConnell decision and what was or was not happening here, you're right. Maybe there isn't any sort of domestic bribery allegation that could be brought in the criminal sense. But first off, I think there may be some books and records, civil offenses that might get investigated. And secondly, it just doesn't pass muster with the public. And this is it's not a good thing. And the other dimension we need to think of is if there are foreign companies, and we had mentioned Novartis, if Novartis or some other foreign company violated foreign bribery statutes in their home country by bribing what seems to be a foreign government to them, which is the Trump administration, could Novartis face issues back in Switzerland? Could some other company face issues in France, in England, in Canada, and I don't know where, that there are many anti-bribery statutes now that focus in on intermediaries and consultants, and that is what Michael Cohen is. So would other companies, foreign companies, face some sort of problem in their home countries for actions they took here with what is to them a foreign government of the Trump administration? We don't know yet.
So we still have $3 or $4 million, if I understood you correctly, Matt, that has been unaccounted for. We do have some monies traced, or at least allegedly traced at this point, to Russian or Ukrainian oligarchs. And at this point, it appears there's been no additional funding for essential consultants. Has there been anything pop up which would suggest that monies paid to essential consultants was used to either reimburse Cohen for the payments he made to Stormy Daniels or any other similar payments?
Well, we don't know that yet, but it is an interesting question because don't forget, in the last week or so, when Rudy Giuliani was doing his train wreck of public appearances, trying to defend the president and making it worse, he did specifically say there might be other payoffs, there might be other non-disclosure agreements out there that Michael Cohen made on behalf of the president. Where did that money come from? And did it come from Russian oligarchs? That does nobody any favors if you are the Trump administration or Donald Trump personally trying to get away from this idea that maybe you were in cahoots with the Russians, that maybe the Russians had some sort of sexual blackmail over the president. As I have mentioned on previous podcasts, what if the Russians didn't have any famous P tape of Donald Trump from 2013 or something like that? What if they've known about Stormy Daniels and others all along? And they're trying to use that as blackmail. And the best way to do that is to keep these things secret. So, of course, you're going to pay off the other sources, the porn stars, to keep it secret. Well, where does that money come from? Looks like it came from the Russians. It looks like, Michael Cohen then took a pile of money and he paid off at least one porn star. We don't know about any others. But, these facts do line up in a way that don't look good for the president. Now, does that lead to impeachment articles or in criminal indictments or anything like that from the Mueller probe? We don't know yet. But just politically and kind of morally, doesn't look good for this guy. And that's really hard for the president to look even worse than he already does. However, this does not help the situation.
Well, I guess we're going to have to follow this one pretty closely. I guess I don't think I've asked you this, but if I have, I'm going to ask it again. Any idea, Matt, where Michael Aminetti dug this information up? Because he seems to be incredibly well sourced.
That is an excellent question that we don't know the answer to. But if you read his report, his Project Sunshine, as he dubbed it, and it's an easy read. It's only about 7 or 8 pages, and it's very richly detailed. He's got specific dates. He's got specific amounts of money transferred. He has the banks that they went through. We haven't even mentioned the fact that First Republic Bank was the bank account that Cohen set up that received all this money, including that $500,000 from the Russian oligarchs. So First Republic alone probably has some customer due diligence issues that are giving its board heartburn today. But I don't know where Avenetti's getting his information, but he's not making random allegations. He's making very specific allegations. And AT&T so far has said that, yes, what he said is true. I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt. Well,
it's certainly fascinating, Matt. And as I said, lots of potential lessons for the compliance practitioner on a story that is probably going to only get more convoluted.
I suspect so.
Well, Matt, thanks for the quick emergency podcast. Matt has blogged about this today in a blog post entitled, "Oh Lord, Michael Cohen Risk is Now a Thing." So we'll link to that in the show notes. And this one we will definitely have to continue the conversation on.
All right.
Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox again. I'd like to thank you for listening to this episode of Compliance Into the Weeds. If you have any questions on this episode, you can contact Matt at mkelly@radicalcompliance.com. You can contact myself at tfox@tfoxlaw.com. Thanks again for joining us. I hope you'll join us again next week when Matt and I take a deep dive into another compliance or compliance-related topic. Compliance Into the Weeds is a part of the Compliance Podcast Network.